The shot was clean. Commander Veilsorn had fired 1,000 times across a dozen conquered worlds, and he knew, with the cold precision of a species that had mapped the universe's cruelty into mathematics, exactly what a killing blow looked like. The plasma bolt struck the human in the chest at point-blank range. The air smelled of scorched fabric and ionized flesh. The human staggered backward 2 steps, collided with a steel bulkhead, and slid halfway down it. If you like my video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel so that I can keep bringing more interesting videos like this. And tell me in the comments below where you are watching it. Then he laughed. Not a short, broken sound. Not the gasping half noise of a dying creature clinging to its last reflex. It was full, genuine. The kind of laugh that belonged in a warm room among friends, not in the sterile interrogation bay of an earthery command vessel suspended 3,000 kilometers above a surrendered Earth. Veilsorn stood completely still. Behind him, his 2 subordinates, Lieutenant Thusk and the young intelligence analyst Oru, exchanged a glance that neither could fully decode. Thusk's crest feathers, a biological indicator the earthery could no more control than a human could stop a flinch, rose involuntarily. Oru took a half-step backward. The human designation, Warrant Officer Marcus Cole, age 34, former Special Operations, currently listed in the earthery database as low priority, non-combatant, pressed one hand flat against his chest. His fingers came away red. He looked at them with mild interest, the way a man might examine an unexpected stain on a shirt he didn't particularly like anyway. Then he looked up at Veilsorn. "You hit me," Marcus said. His voice carried no accusation, only observation, and beneath it, something that made Oru's translator chip offer the word amusement before quickly revising to unknown emotional register. "That was the intention," Veilsorn replied. His galactic standard was flawless. The earthery had always been thorough. He kept his weapon raised. "You will answer the questions put to you, or I will fire again." "Sure." Marcus pushed himself upright against the bulkhead. The wound was real. Veilsorn could see the labored rhythm of his breathing, yet the human stood as though pain were simply weather. "Inconvenient. Temporary. Go ahead and ask." Veilsorn had expected screaming. He had expected bargaining. Humans were documented hagglers, creatures of desperation who traded information for comfort. He had not, in 30 years of military command, expected permission. "Where are the remaining resistance caches hidden in the northern hemisphere?" he asked. Marcus tilted his head. The smile didn't leave his face. "No idea." The second shot hit the human in the shoulder. The laugh that followed was shorter this time, bitten through with something sharp, but it was still a laugh. And that single fact pressed against the inside of Veilsorn's chest like a structural fault no engineer had anticipated. Thusk stepped close and murmured into his commander's auditory receptor. "Sir, his physiological readings are." "I can see his physiological readings." Veilsorn had not lowered his weapon. He was staring at Marcus Cole, who was now using the wall to stay vertical, still watching him with that dark, patient expression. "They make no sense." "No," Thusk agreed quietly. "They don't." The earthery had conquered 11 species in 4 centuries. They had studied fear in every biological configuration it could take. They had charts, models, entire academic disciplines dedicated to the mechanics of breaking a living mind. None of it had produced a single footnote on this, on a species that laughed. Veilsorn slowly lowered his weapon, not out of mercy, but because something older than strategy moved through him. The deep, wordless warning that stirs in a predator the moment it realizes it has badly misread the terrain. "What are you?" he said. Marcus Cole met his eyes. "Tired," the human said softly. "Mostly just tired." He smiled again, and this time, it did not reach his eyes. The earthery command vessel Sovereign Patience had a reputation. It was not the largest ship in the fleet, nor the most heavily armed. What it possessed, in place of brute tonnage, was precision. Every corridor was calibrated for efficiency. Every system ran at optimal parameters. Every prisoner it had ever held had, within 72 hours, told the earthery exactly what they needed to know. 72 hours was considered generous. Marcus Cole had been aboard for 9. Veilsorn stood in the observation corridor outside the holding cell, hands clasped behind his back, watching through the one-way transparency panel as the human sat on the floor, not the bench provided, the floor, with his back against the wall and his legs crossed loosely beneath him. The 2 plasma wounds had been field-dressed by the medical unit, less out of compassion than practicality. A dead prisoner answered nothing. Marcus appeared to be sleeping. He hasn't spoken since you left the interrogation bay, Oro reported, pulling up a data scroll beside his commander. The young analyst had the nervous energy of someone whose models were all returning errors. He accepted water, refused nutrients. He's been in that position for, Ora checked, 4 hours and 17 minutes. Is he meditating? Thusk asked from the other side of the corridor, arms folded across his broad chest. The lieutenant was a practical creature. He preferred problems with surfaces he could press against. The brainwave patterns don't match any meditative state in the database, Ora said. Honestly, sir, they don't match much of anything. There are stress indicators present, but they're, he paused, searching for language adequate to the data, compartmentalized, packed away somewhere, like he's put the pain in a room and locked the door. Veilsorn said nothing. He had spent the last 4 hours reading Marcus Cole's file. The Earthery intelligence apparatus was the finest in the explored galaxy. They had compiled dossiers on every notable human before the formal surrender. Cole's was thin. Deliberately suspiciously thin. Special operations background, several entries redacted under clearance levels that no longer technically existed, and a single psychological evaluation from 6 years prior with one phrase circled by whatever human analyst had filed it. Thrives under terminal pressure. The phrase had seemed meaningless at the time of capture. It did not seem meaningless now. Pull the historical files, Veilsorn said quietly. Human military history. Specifically, documented behavior under conditions of extreme duress. Oro hesitated. Sir, that's a significant archive. Several thousand years of continuous warfare. Then start reading. Oro began. Veilsorn kept his gaze on the cell. In the years leading up to the Earthery arrival, the human governments had done what conquered species always did when a superior force materialized in their orbital space. They calculated odds, convened emergency councils, and surrendered. The mathematics were beyond dispute. The Earthery outnumbered them, outgunned them, had been crossing interstellar distances, while humans were still burning carbon for locomotion. The surrender had been so swift, so orderly, that the Earthery had privately catalogued humanity as docile, adaptable, a managed population that would present no long-term complications. 15 years of quiet occupation had confirmed this assessment. No organized resistance. No uprisings of scale. Humans went to their labor assignments. They filed their resource declarations. They kept their heads down with a discipline that bordered on cultural reflex. Veilsorn had found it almost disappointing. And then, 8 weeks ago, 17 Earthery installations had gone dark within the same 40-minute window. Not destroyed. Scrubbed. Every record, every file, every biological sample they'd spent 15 years collecting. Gone. Someone had not been keeping their head down. Someone had been waiting. Inside the cell, Marcus Cole opened his eyes. He did not look at the transparency panel, he couldn't see through it. But something about the angle of his gaze, the slight adjustment of his head, suggested that on some level, he knew exactly where Veilsorn was standing. He raised 2 fingers. A small gesture. A wave. Sir. Ora's voice had dropped to something close to a whisper. I'm 12% through the historical archive, and I've already found, he stopped. Found what? Thusk demanded. Ora turned from his data scroll. His crest feathers, normally flat and disciplined, were fully raised. They've done this before, he said. Not once. Not twice. He glanced back at the panel, at the human sitting calmly in his locked cell with 2 fresh plasma burns and an expression like a man waiting for a bus. Commander, this species has been going quiet directly before every major reversal in their history. It's a pattern. Across centuries. He swallowed. We classified them as docile. The corridor held the word for a moment. We were supposed to, Marcus said. Every head turned. He was facing the transparency panel directly now. He couldn't see them, the physics were absolute on that point. But he spoke with the unhurried confidence of a man addressing a room he knew was full. "Take your time with the archive," he continued, his voice carrying easily through the audio feed. "We wrote most of it down. Figured someone would need to find it eventually." The smile returned to his face. This time it was not tired at all. The archive took Oris 6 hours to process. When he finally stepped into Veilsorn's command chamber, he looked like a creature that had opened a door expecting a closet and found instead a cathedral. His data scroll trembled slightly in his grip, not from structural failure, but from the hands holding it. Veilsorn gestured for him to speak. Oris set the scroll on the table and pulled up the first marker. Thermopylae. 480 BC. 300 soldiers held a mountain pass against an estimated force of over 100,000 for 3 days. They knew they would die. They went anyway. He advanced the marker. Stalingrad. 1942, a city reduced to rubble. Humans fighting room to room, floor to floor, sometimes wall to wall, in temperatures that should have rendered organized resistance biologically impossible. He advanced again. Chosen Reservoir. Ia Drang. Fallujah. Each name landed like a stone dropped into still water. In each case, the historical record shows the same signature, a period of apparent submission, consolidation beneath the surface, then a response that exceeded every projected parameter. Thesk, who had served in 4 conquest campaigns and prided himself on the inability to be surprised, was very still. "These are ancient conflicts," he said carefully. "Primitive technology. Internal human warfare. It doesn't necessarily translate to, I haven't reached the modern entries," Aura said. He advanced the scroll. The data that followed was not ancient. It was flagged with earthery classification seals, their own intelligence, gathered during the 15 years of occupation. Veilsorn leaned forward as the pattern emerged with the slow, horrible clarity of a shape resolving through fog. 41 months ago, a earthery communications relay in the Southern Ocean began transmitting ghost signals. Investigation found nothing. The relay was logged as a minor technical anomaly. 29 months ago, 3 separate labor facilities reported small discrepancies in their human workforce headcounts. Workers accounted for. Discrepancies logged as administrative error. 19 months ago, a survey of human medical facilities found an unusual concentration of certain chemical compounds. Compounds consistent with, among other things, the treatment of plasma burns. The survey officer noted it and filed the report under low-priority medical inventory variants. The reports were all there. Every piece of the picture, filed by earthery officers across 15 years of occupation, cataloged and cross-referenced, and assigned a priority level of irrelevant. "They hid it in our own filing system," Veilsorn said. "Not just hid it," Aura replied. He pulled up one final document, a recovered fragment from the scrubbed installations, partially reconstructed by the Intelligence Division. It was a human communication, undated, authored by an individual whose name appeared only as an initial. MC. Veilsorn's eyes moved across the text. The principle is simple. A species that has never lost does not know what losing looks like from the inside. Show them submission. Show them compliance. Give them the data points they expect, and they will build a model around those data points with complete confidence. They will file the anomalies as noise because their entire framework tells them the signal cannot exist. Let them build the cage around nothing. Then walk out. Veilsorn set the fragment down. He crossed the corridor to the holding cell in 40 seconds, overrode the lock manually, and stepped inside. Marcus Cole was exactly where he'd been, on the floor, back to the wall. But his eyes were open and alert, carrying the particular quality of a man who had not actually been resting at all, but performing rest with complete commitment. A subtle distinction. A crucial one. The installations, Veilsorn said without preamble. Gone, Marcus confirmed pleasantly. The data we spent 15 years collecting on human biology. Genetic markers, neurological mapping, population vulnerability indices. Unfortunate. You took it. Marcus said nothing, which Veilsorn was learning was its own species of answer. For 41 months, Veilsorn said, and his voice had shed its command authority, stripped down now to something older and quieter and far more dangerous than anger. Your people were not complying. They were drilling. Marcus looked up at him. I told you, he said. We were tired. He paused, and the pause had the deliberate weight of a man who chooses every word with the care of someone placing charges in a very specific sequence. Tired of waiting. Vale Sorn crouched to eye level, something no earthly commander did with a prisoner, ever, under any doctrine. He needed to see the human's face without the interference of hierarchy between them. The laughter, he said quietly. When I shot you, that wasn't shock. That wasn't delirium. He searched Marcus's expression. You were relieved. Marcus Cole held his gaze for a long moment. You finally moved, he said. We've been watching for 15 years, waiting for you to make a mistake we could answer. The corner of his mouth lifted. You walked a warrant officer from Special Operations into an interrogation room and told 2 junior officers to watch the door. He tilted his head. That's not a mistake we'd let a recruit make. The implications arranged themselves in Vale Sorn's mind with the architectural precision of a building falling. Where are they? He said. The ship groaned. Not metaphorically. The hull itself produced a low, resonant vibration that traveled through the floor and up through Vale Sorn's boots and into his bones. Every alert system on the Sovereign patients ignited simultaneously, painting the corridor outside the cell in urgent red. Marcus Cole didn't look at the ceiling. He didn't look at the door. He looked at Vale Sorn with an expression of such complete and practiced calm that it was somehow more terrifying than rage would have been. They're here, he said. The alerts didn't stop. They layered, cascading across every tactical frequency the Sovereign patients operated on, each one arriving faster than the last, each one a different shade of the same impossible message. Vale Sorn heard Thesk's voice cutting through the noise from the corridor, clipped and controlled, reading the incoming data with the mechanical discipline of a soldier who had trained for crisis and was now discovering that training had a ceiling. 17 vessels decloaked in Orbital Grid 7, configuration unknown. They're not in any recognition database. Hull breach on sublevel 4, non-explosive entry. Something cut through. Communications array is being, Sir, someone is talking on our internal frequencies. Vale Sorn had not moved. He was still crouched at eye level with Marcus Cole, and in some distant, analytical corner of his mind he recognized that this stillness, this refusal to break the geometry of the moment, was a choice he was making consciously. Because the moment he stood and turned toward the door, the interrogation ended. The dynamic shifted, and whatever leverage existed in this small cell would dissolve entirely. 17 vessels, he said. Where did they come from? Same place most dangerous things come from, Marcus replied. Somewhere you weren't looking. He was right. The Earthery's sensor grid around Earth was comprehensive. They had staked their strategic confidence on its comprehensiveness. But a sensor grid, Vale Sorn understood now with cold retrospective clarity, was only as complete as the assumptions that designed it. And they had designed it to detect threats emerging from space. Not threats that had never left. You hid them in the atmosphere, Vale Sorn said. It was not a question. Upper mesosphere. Cold, thin air, minimal thermal signature at rest. Marcus's voice remained conversational, as though discussing engineering choices of mild academic interest. Took 11 months to get them up there without your satellites catching the launches. We moved them in pieces. Cargo containers, weather equipment, a surprising amount of scientific research balloons. He almost smiled. You approved several of the permits yourself. The ship shuddered again, deeper this time, a resonance that spoke of structural engagement rather than weapons impact. Whatever was cutting through sublevel 4 was doing so with patience and geometry rather than force. Precise. Surgical. The vocabulary of people who had spent 15 years studying exactly where to press. Vale Sorn finally stood. He looked down at Marcus Cole. 2 plasma burns, 9 hours of captivity, and an expression of such settled, unhurried certainty that it recontextualized every interaction they'd had since the moment the bolt hit him. The laughter. The wave at the one-way panel. The easy permission to go ahead and ask. None of it had been defiance. Defiance implied resistance to superior power. This had been something else entirely. This had been a man filling time. You knew we'd take you, Veilsorn said. I volunteered, Marcus said simply. Someone needed to be on the ship when it started. Helps to have eyes on the inside. He reached into the collar of his uniform and produced, with unhurried ease, a small device that should not have survived the intake search, which meant the intake search had been performed by officers who found what they expected to find and stopped looking. Helps more to have a transmitter. Veilsorn stared at it. You've been talking to them, he said. The entire time. Listening mostly. They're very capable. They don't need much guidance. Marcus closed his fingers around the device and lowered his hand. I did tell them where your shield emitters were, and your secondary power junctions, and the precise harmonic frequency your hull plating resonates at when you heat the interior to earthy comfort temperature. He paused. You keep it very warm. We appreciated that, actually. Made the readings extremely consistent. From the corridor, Thusk's voice arrived at a register Veilsorn had never heard from him. Sir, they're not attacking. The vessels, they're not firing. They're just holding. All 17. Sitting in formation and they're broadcasting. On every frequency. Every channel we have. What are they broadcasting? Veilsorn asked, though some deep and ancient instinct already knew. Thusk's answer came slowly. Coordinates. Hundreds of them. Across the whole system. A pause that lasted precisely long enough for the weight to fully settle. Sir, they're not just here. This isn't a rescue operation. Veilsorn turned to look at Marcus one final time. Every earthly installation, he said quietly. Every vessel. Every forward base in this system. Marcus Cole rose from the floor with the unhurried ease of a man who had been waiting for a specific moment and had just watched it arrive. He rolled his wounded shoulder once, testing it, and then stood at his full height and looked at Veilsorn without performance, without theater, simply, directly, as one commander looks at another across a table when the map has already decided the conversation. For 15 years, he said, you watched us comply. File our reports. Attend our assignments. Keep our heads down. He let that sit for precisely a breath. You built a model. You trusted the model. You stopped watching the parts of us that didn't fit it. His voice carried no triumph. Triumph would have cheapened it. Every species you've ever conquered. How many of them had done this before? How many of them had entire libraries dedicated to exactly this situation? To occupation and patience, and the precise art of making a superior force comfortable enough to stop being careful. Veilsorn had no answer, which was, he recognized, its own kind of answer. The coordinates your people are broadcasting right now, Marcus continued, are going to every resistance cell on Earth and in orbit. Simultaneously. Along with the shield frequencies, the communication encryption keys, and the command authorization codes we pulled from your installations 8 weeks ago. He tilted his head. You can still fight. I want to be honest with you about that. This isn't over, because we say it is. He paused. But you'll be doing it without your communications infrastructure, without resupply lines, and against a population that just watched 17 ships appear from inside the planet's own atmosphere. Something moved behind his eyes. Not cruelty, not satisfaction, but something more uncomfortable than either. Understanding. Your soldiers are going to start asking questions about what else they missed. And that question, once it takes root, is very hard to stop. The alerts had gone quiet. Not resolved. Quiet. There was a difference, and the sovereign patience felt it in the way a room feels the moment before a verdict is read. Veilsorn stood in the holding cell of his own ship and looked at a man he had shot twice, held captive for 9 hours, and catastrophically, fundamentally misunderstood, and felt, for the first time in 30 years of command, the specific vertigo of a mind rebuilding its foundations in real time. You let us conquer you, he said. We let you think you did, Marcus replied. There's a gap between those two things wide enough to hide 17 ships in. He stepped past Veilsorn toward the open cell door. Not rushing, not fleeing, moving with the quiet confidence of someone walking through a room that had already been cleared. He paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, he said without turning around. "We don't want a war. We never did. Wars are expensive and we've had enough of them. You'd know that if you'd read further in the archive." He glanced back over his shoulder, and there was something in his expression that was neither victory nor mercy, but occupied the complicated territory between them. "We want a conversation. A real one. Between species who've both put their cards on the table." He looked at the plasma burns on his own arm. "You showed us yours," he said. "Figured it was time." He walked out into the corridor. Behind him, Veilsorn stood motionless in an empty cell, surrounded by the quiet hum of a ship that had just discovered it was not the most patient thing in the room. Outside the viewports, 17 human vessels held their formation against the stars, patient, perfectly still, and absolutely immovable, like a people that had spent 15 years learning exactly how long to wait. And now knew they were done waiting.